Good evening. This is the Groton Utilities Commission / Water Pollution Control Authority public hearing on proposed electrical rate schedule for Monday, January 4th, 2021. Pursuant to the State of Connecticut Executive Order 7B, protection of public health and safety during COVID pandemic and response, further suspension or modification of statutes dated March 14, 2020, suspending in-person open meeting requirements. All public meetings will be closed to the public. At this time, public meetings will be available on Zoom. Phone number 1-312-626-6799. Meeting ID 934-6379-7902. Passcode 845444. With that, I will call the public meeting to order. The second thing on the agenda is the statements of notice. A public hearing published December 23rd, 2020 in the Day newspaper of New London. Let me read that. I'm not going to read it all. It's all in its entirety because it has the rates in it. I'm going to read the highlights of it. It is posted on the city's website. It's the City of Groton Utilities Commission notice of public hearing. Notice is hereby given to the City of Groton Utilities Commissioners hold a public hearing on Monday, January 4th, 2021 at 6:30 prevailing time via Zoom. The phone number 1-312-626-6799, meeting ID 934-6379-7902, passcode 845444. On proposed revisions to the existing electrical rate schedules. At this hearing, all consumers of electricity, property owners serviced by the Electric Division, City of Groton Department of Utilities, and other interested persons shall have an opportunity to be heard, and written communications relative to the above will be received and considered. Copies of the complete text of the proposed rate schedules are available for public inspection. Please contact Director's Office at City of Groton at grotonutilities.com or call 860-446-4092. The City of Groton Department of Utilities electric rates billed on and before after April 1st, 2021, billed on and after April 1st, 2022, and billed on and after April 1st, 2023. We continue on. Residential service is applicable to the entire electrical requirements in a single family dwelling and appurtenances, or to an individual apartment or in a common use area of apartment buildings or condominium buildings where residential usage exceeds 50% of the monthly metered energy. The net metering rider is also applicable to any customer with approved customer-owned self-generation. Next area is small general service, applicable to the entire electrical requirements for light, heat, and power on the customer's premises for small commercial customers with an annual peak kilowatt demand between 0 and 10 kilowatts. That metering rider is also applicable to any customer on this rate with approved customer-owned self-generation. Medium general service, applicable to the entire normal electrical requirements for for light, heat, and power on the customer's premises for the medium commercial customers whose annual peak demand is from 10 to 99 kilowatts. The net metering rider is also applicable to any customer on this rate with approved customer-owned self-generation. Large general service to the entire normal electrical requirement for heat, light, and power on the customer's premises were for large commercial / industrial commercial customers whose annual peak demand is from 100 to 10,000 kilowatts, for which no other rate schedule is applicable. Normal requirements include those kilowatt hours and the customer usually self-generates. The net metering rider is also applicable to any customer on this rate with approved customer-owned self-generation served at secondary voltage. High voltage large general service to the entire normal electrical requirements for light, heat, and power of the customer's premises where customers' full energy requirements, including standby requirements, exceed 10,000 kilowatts per month, and where customer is served via dual feeder delivery at a standard sub-transmission voltage nominally at 35 kilovolts. Large general service electric rate schedule, sale for resale to electric energy distribution companies for the sole purpose of providing the electric energy requirements of the company's service territory. Street and area lighting service to public or private customers for standard street and area lighting installations provided and maintained by the department to render 4,000 annual hours of lighting. Overhead installation is a light fixture attached to an existing overhead distribution system. Underground installation is a light fixture attached to a new pole served from an existing underground distribution system. Traffic light service to public and private customers for standard traffic lighting installations provided and maintained by the department. Net metering rider applicable to customers on residential small general service, medium general service, large general service, secondary distribution, rates with alternate power source availability. This rider is applicable to customers with approved alternate power sources, APS, of electricity other than Groton Utilities. Customer generation does not relieve Groton Utilities of the obligation to deliver all power requirements. Public electric vehicle charging stations, applicable to the entire electrical requirements of an electric vehicle charging station that is publicly available for charging. Unmetered rate availability for sign lightings, CATV, amplifier, radio, and similar uses located on Groton Utilities distribution lines suitable for supplying the service requested, subject to the following conditions. Primary wheeling service. For wheeling service within the Groton Utilities system to any customers who are eligible to receive service under the HVLGS rate for the delivery of electric generation services provided to the customer's location over the Groton Utilities system to another location occupied by the customer that is also served by Groton Utilities. Customers who utilize any part of the Groton Utilities delivery system to wheel the customer's self-generation must comply with Groton Utilities interconnection policy and shall pay this tariff for wheeling service. And that's it. Okay. Next, the summary of the rationale for proposed electric rate schedule presented by Mark Boshop of Utility Financial Solutions. Mark, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thank you. I'm going to share my screen. This way. I gotta get this thing out of the way. There we go. All right. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to the City Council on the proposed rate design and the rationale behind it. Now, what you're going to see is a 5-year financial projection that we had completed. Now, we're proposing rates for the first 3 years, but we did a 5-year projection just for planning purposes. We also did a cost of service study, which identifies how much it costs to provide service to each class compared to how much revenue we received. That gives an indication of how much or how we should move the rates to move the customer classes closer to cost of service. As part of that, we also looked at what the fixed monthly customer charge should be for each class. Then we did a rate design for each of the rate classes. And I'll summarize each of these. The first thing is when we built the financial projection based upon certain assumptions. The assumptions that we used related to like capital improvements, the capital improvement plan, which is listed right here. We assumed about $5 million a year in capital improvements, and that came out of a capital projection that was completed. As part of that, we looked at how much of that capital plan should be funded through existing cash reserves, how much should be funded through what's called rate the capital recovery that's built into everybody's rates, and how much should be funded through bond issuances. So as part of this, we identified that the first 2 years could be funded primarily through cash reserves and the amount of rate funded capital. And the capital improvement plan for 24 through 26 would require a certain amount of debt issuances. We also looked at what the purchase power costs are going to be and the changes. Now, this is one of the things that what you're going to see is an overall rate reduction for customers of about 1.3%. But the rates are built up, there's many components that go into the rate. One of the components is power supply cost, the cost from CMEC. Those are going to lower customers' rates by on average about 4.1%. Then there's the distribution cost, the wire side of the business to distribute the energy from the transmission system in Groton to the customers. That part of the rate is actually going up by 2.8%. When you net the two together, customers will see on average about a 1.3% rate reduction. But some of the customer classes are going to see bigger reductions than others. And that's where the cost of service study comes in, where we try to move the classes closer to cost of service. This is the summary of the 5-year financial projection. And what we look at in a projection is, the first thing is the availability of cash. So Groton Utilities electric department is projected to have about 21.9 million of available cash reserves. Those cash reserves consist of two components really. One is internal cash reserves that are about $13 million that is held locally by Groton Utilities. And we feel that there's an additional $8 million that's available through CMEC that could be used in case of an emergency. So we're trying to identify how much cash is available that if some catastrophic event were to occur, to identify how much cash is available to cover us in case of a catastrophic event. And we also looked at what the minimum level of cash that the utility should maintain in reserves. It's about 14 million. So you can see that the utility from a cash perspective is relatively strong. However, when you look out over 5 years, you see the cash reserves declining. And in 2026, the available cash is about equal or close to the recommended minimum amount. So because of that, we're actually in the projection. We're not proposing it at this time. It will be assessed in a few years. But we're looking at the possibility of a 1% increase in rates in about 3 years. But for this rate proposal, we're looking at a rate reduction of 1.3%, followed by no changes in revenue changes in 23 or 24. Also, another target we look at is debt coverage ratio. We want to make sure that we're not in violation of any bond ordinance. And we try to maintain a minimum coverage ratio of 1.4. And you can see that we're above those minimum requirements in each of the 5 years with the projected rate track. The second part of our study was the cost of service study. And as I mentioned, what we're doing here is we're looking at how much it costs to provide service to each class of customers compared to the projected revenues from each class. So for residential, it costs about 15.5 million to provide service. The projected revenues is 14.6 million. So from a cost of service standpoint, the residential class needs about a 6.3% increase. We're not proposing that occur. And that 6.3% is really on the distribution side of the business. So that is actually going to be pulled downward because of the reduction in the power supply cost from CMEC. So you can see that some classes show some increases, some like street lighting, larger increases, almost 42%. And then some of the larger classes actually show rate reductions. So we're using this to move the classes closer to cost of service when we actually do the rate design. Now, as part of the study, we also looked at what that fixed monthly customer charge should be. You're currently charging residential customers $20 a month. The cost of service study says it should be about $26 a month. And we're not proposing that we move fully from $20 to $26.53. But what you're going to see in the rate design is an increase of about $1.50 per month for each of the 3-year period. Now, by having the customer charge increasing, what that's doing is it's lowering the energy rates. So residential customers overall are going to see a rate reduction. On average, in the first year, it's a small reduction, but it's about 69 cents per month on average for residential customer. But we use these cost of service results in the customer charges to move these customer charges closer to the cost of providing service. Now, this is the actual summary of the proposed rate designs that were just reviewed. As I mentioned, the residential service is going to see a slight reduction of about 0.56%. Overall, the reduction in the first year is about 1.27% or 1.3% overall reduction. In years 2 and 3, it's pretty much a revenue neutral rate change. Now, some of these classes, such as residential net metering, all of the net metering rates are actually, those rates are tied to their actual rate category. So for example, residential net metering rates are tied to the residential service rate. So this minus 1.44% is actually something that's kind of a default, because as we change the residential rate, the net metering rate just comes out of that. Now, there's only 3 rate classes where we're proposing some slight rate increases, and that consists of the street lighting and area lighting, the traffic lights, and also the unmetered is a slight increase, and also the small general service net metering. But most of these classes, these increases are very modest. And the reason those increases are occurring is because the rate increases, the side of that's seeing the increases is the distribution side of the business. These rate classes don't use a lot of energy. So as a result of that, the rate reductions from CMEC, they don't see the benefit because they don't use as much energy. So that's why they're seeing slight increases where other classes are seeing actually rate decreases. Now, some of these classes, like large general service, are seeing rate reductions in the first year closer to 3%. And again, that's driven by the cost of service results. So to get into some of the details, on the residential service, you can see this is the actual proposed rates. And you can see the customer charge, which is currently $20, that we're proposing it to be increased by $1.50 in each of the years. And then the energy rates, which is currently set at 13 cents a kilowatt hour, that those are going down each year, down from 13 cents to 12.4 to 12.1 and 11.9. And overall, you can see that the reduction is about 0.6% the first year. The average residential customer in Groton uses about 700 kilowatt hours a month. So they will see a rate reduction of 69 cents the first year, 35 cents the second year, and 8 cents the third year. You can see that all of the classes in year 1, all of the residential ratepayers will see some form of a rate reduction in year 1. In years 2 and 3, most of them will see rate reductions. Smaller users might see a very modest increase, and that's because of the $1.50 increase in the monthly customer charge. Overall, percentage-wise, This graph shows the percentage increase at different levels of usage. So at 500 kilowatt hours a month, it's pretty much revenue neutral. They wouldn't see any rate change, percent reduction. At 1,400 kilowatt hours a month, they would see a little over a 1% reduction. So this last slide I have is a rate comparison between Groton and your benchmark utilities. And I'd like to turn this over to Aaron, if I could, to talk about the rate comparison.
Sure, Mark. So this is Aaron with Groton Utilities. Can everybody hear me? All right. So just real brief, I just wanted to just touch base, make sure I give everybody the information that they are looking for and that they need. So when we do rate surveys, we're of course looking at Eversource primarily, but we do also kind of look around the rest of the state and compare ourselves. So for our average residential customer, we're going to be about 28% below NPU. So I just want to make sure that I provided that information to the commission and council, and happy to answer any questions. If not, I'll give it back to Mark.
Thank you so much, Aaron. And that's my last slide, and I'd like to open up for questions.
Mark, Councilor Depot has a question. Or sorry, Deputy Mayor Depot has a question.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Well, I have a couple of questions. My first question is, what triggered the assessment of the rates? Was this a standard, just regularly scheduled review of our rates, or was there something that triggered it other than that?
No, I believe, and Ron, you may want to address this, but I believe you look at your rates every 3 years. Most utilities look at rates approximately every 3 years.
That's 100% true. When we got here, we decided to do, the Utility Commission asked that we look at all the rates on all the businesses. And as part of that commitment, when we were doing it, we said we would come up with 3-year schedules so that everybody would be able to look ahead for 3 years at a time. We just finished doing each of the businesses the first time, and then we just went back to see how we were doing to plan with what we started with, which was GU Electric and actually also Basra Light and Power. So we just refreshed that model, and actually by refreshing the model, it actually drove the cost way down also, because the model had already been created by Mark.
So was the last time we changed rates in 2018?
17.
Okay.
2017, yeah.
And then another question is, hold on, I'm sorry, I have a couple of questions. How does this impact low-income ratepayers? Because it looks like the smaller, the less power you use, the less money you're saving.
It's a great question. We actually looked at that. The average low-income customer uses about 822 kilowatt hours a month, I believe. So they're going to see a slightly larger reduction than the average. But they're going to see about $1 reduction in the first year. Was it 822, Aaron? Is that the correct number?
Exactly, Mark, you got it. 822. We surveyed, includes about 208 customers, or almost 2% of our customer base. Extra statistics.
Aaron, what was the metric you used to define low income?
Sure. So basically, we pulled all of the meters from customers that have TVCCA funding, or United Way funding, or Groton Human Services.
can I just keep asking questions? I don't know who's in charge of the meeting, but is that all right?
100%.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Uh, is part of the reason for the rate reduction because the increase of income from COVID? Because we get monthly reports on the council, and it appears that the residential rates, people have been using more electricity, presumably because more people have been home. I know I use more electricity when I'm home. So has that increased our income has that correlation been made, just out of curiosity?
Well, what we did, it's going to might sound a little funny, but we kind of, even though we projected out the 2021 year, the study, because COVID can actually skew the cost of service results.
Mm-hmm.
So other than using the cash projections for this year with COVID, we really excluded the COVID projections because we're assuming that sometime next year we're gonna go back to normal usage. So
Okay, that's where I was going with that. And I think my last question. So can you, anyone, doesn't matter who, explain the logic? Why are we increasing the initial delivery charge and decreasing the cost per kilowatt hour? Like, what's the logic behind that?
that's a great question, and it's a common question because I know a lot of people don't always understand what that customer charge is or why it's there. And what it represents is the fixed cost of delivery of electricity to a customer. So when a customer has a meter, we have the cost and the responsibility to repair and replace the meter. We also have to read it and bill it every month. And then there's a certain portion of the infrastructure that also gets allocated into that customer charge. And it's becoming, utilities around the country have been, for over the past 10 years really, have been moving that customer charge up to the cost of service amounts for a couple of reasons. One is to ensure that we recover as a utility our fixed cost of operations. And then also, secondly, we send the proper price signals to customers. When they reduce usage, that there's some correlation between their reduction in their bill and our reduction in our cost. Hopefully that makes sense, what I said.
It does, but if what you're saying is because the reduction in their bill isn't going to correlate with a reduction in what it costs us to deliver, it is just a reduction in the rate. So the cost to deliver is steady. It's going to stay the same. That's never really going to change.
Correct.
It only will eventually go up because wages go up and all that stuff goes up. So it's only ever going to go up. So the main thing for people to reduce their costs is going to be to reduce their usage, which we're making more of an impact. The lower the rates are, obviously, the better for them. But that cost of service, we shouldn't expect that to ever go down. Right.
The customer charge is correct.
Right.
The energy piece, what I was referring to is that when a customer uses less electricity, that the reduction in their bill, because right now the rate is 12.4 cents per kilowatt hour is what's being proposed. So if they use a kilowatt hour less of electricity, they save 12.4 cents. And the utility in the short run is going to save something close. In the short run, it's only going to save about 8-9 cents. But in the long run would save that 12.4 cents, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I lied. I have one more question. So on the yearly basis, why would we decrease it now? I know we're not decreasing it by too much, but why would we decrease it now if we know we're going to have to increase it in 2 years?
Well, part of it is, when we do a 5-year projection like this, this sounds kind of funny, but the only thing I'm certain of is I'm going to be wrong. And, even though, because it's built on several assumptions, capital plan, inflation, change in power supply costs. And it's it's the best assumptions we have today. So even though when we do these projections, we usually come really close in the first 2 or 3 years. So we have a lot of confidence in setting a rate going 3 years out. But once you start getting into years 4 and 5, there's so much variability that we recommend that the utility takes a look at this financial projection after 2024 to see if these rate changes are really in fact going to be needed. You know, there's a lot of things that can change. The capital plan could change is one of the things. So even though we plug 1% in there as a placeholder right now, we're not 100% certain that's going to be needed at that time. So I'd rather go forward with a rate reduction today and see if that 1% is going to be needed in 2025.
So when we did the rate change 3 years ago or 4 years ago, whenever it was, what was our projection for 2022 if we had a 5-year projection?
I don't remember it exactly, but I believe it was actually pretty close. What occurred between 2017 and 2022, the difference between, because we had proposed rate adjustments, I believe they're on 2% a year, somewhere around there, 2 or 3%. And what we did back then was we lowered the power supply rates and from CMAQ, because we have a certain amount of funds over there, so that customers saw 0 increase in their bills. Well, between 2017 and today, CMAQ was able to lower their costs even further, which is really what's driving that rate reduction of 1.3%, is power supply costs have come down.
When we, I'm presuming that Director Gaudet is going to be the one to bring this before the council. When we have it in front of the council, can you track down that last assessment just so we can compare them?
Sure, I can definitely do that.
Thank you. That's it. I'm done. And thank you for all of your answers, Mark.
Oh, thank you.
Are there any other questions for Mark? All right, Mark, are you done? Do you want to continue?
No, I have everything. I've covered everything I wanted to today, but I just want to mention that if you look through the rate designs and if you do have any questions, obviously Ron or me or whatever, I'd love to be able to, any questions that you have on the rates that we proposed, please feel free to ask us.
Okay, are there any other comments from anyone that's in the meeting? I will move on to the next item on the agenda, which is receipt of public comments on proposed electric rate schedule. So this is where the public can ask any questions they may have. Do we have any members of the public who would like to speak? Let me look at this real quick. Okay, I don't see any. I'm going to I'm going to wait a minute. And then if there is no one to respond, then we will close the public hearing. while we're doing this. Mark, I want to thank you for your presentation. Thank you to all the GU employees that were involved in helping to develop this rate track. And thank you to everybody that is on the Zoom call that received this information. Okay, time is up. I do not see or hear any public comments. I will now close the public hearing. So the public hearing is now closed. Thank you all for coming out.
Thank you.